Hi, and welcome back to this second hour of Focal Point, this Thursday edition of Focal Point on AFR Talk. Great to have you in the conversation. Hope you appreciate those opening teasers as much as I do. I don't know where Jeff gets all that stuff, but it's obvious if he has time to go trolling for that stuff, he's got too much time on his hands. No, just kidding. I think that is terrific. I love the creativity involved in that. We're going to play the full exchange, Ted Cruz with Eric Holder, here in just a moment. And it's interesting that this is breaking news. Eric Holder has finally responded to Rand Paul. Rand Paul had the filibuster last night. And here is a very brief, terse, short letter from Eric Holder. He's obviously ticked. This guy is ticked. I mean, there are no niceties. There are no pleasantries. This is just terse. It's to the point. In other words, what Eric Holder, he got caught. He got caught red-handed. Ted Cruz and Rand Paul have made him look like a total fool. And so here is the letter. This is the entire content of the letter that Eric Holder has just sent this morning to Senator Paul. Dear Senator Paul, it has come to my attention that you have now asked an additional question. No, this is not an additional question. This is the same question he's been asking all along. Does the president have the authority to use a weaponized drone to kill an American not engaged in combat on American soil? The answer to that question is no. Sincerely, Eric Holder. Well, that's the question that Rand Paul has been asking from day one. I mean, if Eric Holder did not believe they had the authority to do it, then he didn't have to wait this long to give this letter. He's only done this because political pressure has forced him to admit it. Now let's play the exchange. This is clip 5. This is Ted Cruz yesterday in a hearing, going back and forth with Eric Holder. This is a bit of a longer clip than we typically play. It's about a minute, looks like, and 31 seconds. It's a longer clip, but you need to hear the back and forth between Ted Cruz and how hard he had to work to get Eric Holder to admit something that should have been a no-brainer from the moment the question was raised. Let's listen.
The facts that you have given me, and this is a hypothetical, I would not think that in that situation the use of a drone or lethal force would be appropriate, because the possibility...
General Holder, I have to tell you, I find it remarkable that in that hypothetical, which is deliberately very simple, you are unable to give a simple one-word, one-syllable answer, no. I think it is unequivocal that if the U.S. government were to use a drone to take the life of a U.S. citizen on U.S. soil and that individual did not pose an imminent threat, that would be a deprivation of life without due process.
Maybe I've not been clear. I said that the use of lethal force, and I'm saying drones, guns, or whatever else would not be appropriate in that circumstance.
You keep saying appropriate. My question isn't about propriety. My question is about whether something is constitutional or not. As Attorney General, you are the chief legal officer of the United States. Do you have a legal judgment on whether it would be constitutional to kill a U.S. citizen on U.S. soil in those circumstances?
A person who is not engaged, as you've described. Again, this is the problem with hypotheticals. But the way in which you have described this person sitting at the cafe, not doing anything imminently, the use of lethal force would not be appropriate, would not be something...
I find it remarkable that you still will not give an opinion on the constitutionality. Let me move on to the next topic, because we've gone round and round.
Let me be clear. Translate my appropriate to no. I thought I was saying no.
No, you weren't. You were saying appropriate. That's different than constitutional. Something could be constitutionally permissible and still not be appropriate, not be the right thing or the proper thing to do at that particular point in time. And so, I mean, back and forth to get him. And finally, he's come out today, and he's accusing Rand Paul of asking an additional question. Rand Paul was not doing it. It's the same question he's been asking all the way along. Does the president have the authority to use a weaponized drone to kill an American not engaged in combat on American soil? The answer to that question is no. Finally, we get an answer from Eric Holder. The answer to that question is no. One other comment on the filibuster. We were talking yesterday, had an extensive conversation with an African-American a couple of days ago that was claiming that the Republicans were just outright racists. And I walked him through the entire history of the Republican Party and their involvement in the struggle for equal rights for blacks, for African Americans. I was on a radio interview in the UK this morning, kind of a panel discussion about slavery. And again, I was on with Brian McLaren, who's part of the Emerging Church. Some of you are familiar with him. And he was arguing that Christians supported slavery, all Christians supported slavery, evangelicals supported slavery, the Bible supports slavery. And so I had to kind of take that on head on. And I just reminded him, look, you go back to Exodus 21:16, it was a capital crime under the Mosaic, under the Old Covenant, under the Old Testament, under the criminal code of ancient Israel. It was a crime to steal a man and to sell him. And if you bought a man who had been stolen and you were found in possession of him, that too was a capital crime. You couldn't kidnap somebody. You couldn't sell him. You couldn't buy a man. Man stealing, kidnapping, the slave trade, absolutely forbidden in Exodus 21:16. And that's exactly the kind of slavery that was practiced on U.S. soil. Blacks were kidnapped in Africa by other blacks, by the way. I mean, this is where the whole slave trade started. It had to start with blacks in Africa kidnapping other blacks. A lot of times it was Muslims. A lot of times it was Arabs. You know, we had Bill Federer on the other day. He talked about Robert Livingston, just seeing this train of hundreds of black prisoners shackled and chained, trudging their way through the desert. And if one of them just couldn't keep going, they just shot him and left him to die by the side of the road. You could tell where the Muslim slave traders were going by the trail of vultures in the sky. And you had Africans doing the same thing to fellow Africans, black Africans, kidnapping other black Africans, marching them to the shore, and then selling them to white slave traders. Now, according to the scripture, both the blacks who kidnapped fellow blacks and the white slave traders who purchased them, they should have been put to death. Those guys never should have been able to load the first batch of slaves on their ships. They should never have been able to unload the first batch of slaves on American soil. The first batch of slaves came in 1619. Whoever met that slave ship should have not only refused to let them disembark, should have taken the captain of that slave ship into custody, tried him, and if found guilty, hung him by the neck until he was dead from the nearest tree, and emancipated the slaves that were down in the stinking hold of that ship. That's the Bible's view of slavery. But so I walked this caller through the entire history how the Republican Party was formed for the purpose of containing slavery. I mean, originally its purpose was to keep slavery confined in the states where it was being practiced and to prevent it from expanding to new territories and to new states. Then as the Civil War progressed, the mission of the Republican Party came to be to emancipate slaves and abolish the institution altogether. But that's how the Republican Party started to fight the spread of slavery. It's interesting, the longest filibuster in Senate history, Strom Thurmond, back in 1957, the guy was a Democrat. He became a Republican, so he grew up. But as a Democrat, he filibustered the Civil Rights Act of 1957 for 24 hours and 18 minutes. Who was fighting the expansion of civil rights to African Americans? It was Democrats like Strom Thurmond. It was the Republicans that were fighting for equal rights for blacks. Back in 2.